The Nausicaan ambassador smashed the severed human child's head on the negotiating table. Bits of brain matter and skull fragments sprang across the horrified face of the human diplomat Jeremy Reyes. Rigel grinned, a mouthful of pointed yellow teeth. Submit to the Nausicaan Empire, or more of your mewling offspring will meet this fate. Your weak species is inferior. Accept your place as our subjects or be annihilated. Jeremy shook with barely controlled rage, his knuckles white as he gripped the table. He wanted nothing more than to leap across and strangle Rigel with his bare hands, but he knew attacking the ambassador would lead to an immediate war humanity wasn't yet ready for. This is an unforgivable crime against an innocent child and violation of every law of diplomatic conduct, Jeremy said in a low, trembling voice. I came here in good faith to negotiate a just peace. But you've proven that Nausicaans only understand violence and brutality. Mark my words, humanity will make you pay for this evil. Your worlds will burn for what you've done today. Jeremy transmitted the traumatic events back to the United Earth Council on his journey home. By the time he arrived, humanity was united in their outrage and demands for vengeance against the Nausicaan Empire. Though a young and peaceful federation, they understood only severe retribution would deter the cruel Nausicaans from future atrocities. Fleets of human warships mobilized, ready to unleash unprecedented destruction. Jeremy thought back to 50 years ago when their species first made contact. It had been tense from the start. Nausicaan culture revolved around conquest, combat, and subjugating those they saw as inferior. They viewed humanity's overtures for cooperation and trade as pathetic weakness. Border skirmishes and resource conflicts had steadily escalated. Now the Nausicaans had crossed an unforgivable line. Diplomacy was over. The very survival of Earth was at stake. As the ships blasted into Nausicaan space, Jeremy knew this would be a long and costly war against an advanced, fanatical foe. But for the sake of their murdered child and billions more under threat, humanity would see justice done and make the Nausicaans regret their cruelty. No matter the cost, they would burn their worlds down to ashes. The Earth Force fleet erupted out of hyperspace into the heart of Nausicaan territory, immediately greeted by the flashes of enemy plasma cannons and the glowing trails of incoming missiles. Dagger-shaped Nausicaan warships swarmed around the human vessels, blasting away with ruthless ferocity. On the bridge of Earth Force One, Jeremy gripped the tactical console as the flagship shuddered under the impacts. Damage reports flooded in from across the fleet as human ships took devastating hits. He quickly assessed the enemy formations and barked out orders. Focus fire on their center. Hit them with everything we've got. Their command ships are clustered there. The human fleet unleashed a storm of missiles and railgun rounds, shredding through the Nausicaan vanguard. Jeremy nodded in grim satisfaction as a dozen enemy ships cracked apart and exploded. Drawing on his knowledge of Nausicaan tactics, he helped Earth Force ships maneuver to optimal firing positions and trick the aliens into overextending. As the space battle raged across the system, inflicting heavy losses on both sides, Jeremy readied himself for a crucial mission. Armed to the teeth, he and an elite strike team boarded a cloaked dropship and slipped past the enemy perimeter. Their target, a Nausicaan command ship deep in the alien formation. The strike team blasted their way into the enemy vessel, cutting down the first warriors who rushed to stop them. Alarms blared as they raced deeper into the ship, Jeremy in the lead. A hulking Nausicaan commander leapt out from behind a pillar, swinging a vicious power axe. Jeremy barely dodged the crackling blade and pumped a burst of plasma into the alien's chest. "Push forward," he roared to his team. "We have to reach their mainframe." They fought like demons, leaving piles of Nausicaan corpses in their wake. Finally, they battled to the data core, and Jeremy sliced through the security lockdown. He jammed in a download drive, frantically copying everything he could. Nausicaan reinforcements were almost upon them, blasting at the sealed doors as the precious intel downloaded. They sprinted back to their dropship, pulverizing Nausicaans who tried to block their escape. As Jeremy leapt aboard, a plasma bolt seared across his armor, burning into his flesh. He screamed in agony, but held on until the ship blasted away. The stolen data proved invaluable, allowing human fleets to target Nausicaan fuel depots, repair yards, and weapons factories. The Earth Force hammer slammed into the enemy infrastructure, slowly grinding them down. But the Nausicaans struck back just as hard. Waves of suicide ships rammed human capital ships and transports. Powerful bombs detonated inside human ships, slaughtering whole crews in searing fireballs. On the surfaces of colony worlds and conquered Nausicaan planets, armies clashed in brutal ground warfare. Tanks dueled across blasted wastelands, while infantry fought building to building in shattered cities. Forests burned and plains became drenched in blood as hundreds of thousands fell. From his position on Earth Force One, Jeremy watched the casualty reports mount ever higher as the war consumed planet after planet, system after system. Entire Nausicaan colonies were blasted into rubble by human orbital strikes. Human settlements were burned and civilians butchered by the Nausicaans. A horrible realization crept over Jeremy as he stared at the unceasing slaughter and destruction. Humanity had vowed to avenge an innocent child and make the Nausicaans pay for their crimes. But as he saw his own forces bombard planets and incinerate alien populations, he couldn't help but wonder if Earth had become something just as dark and cruel as what they fought against. Had humanity sacrificed its soul for vengeance? Were they now no better than the monsters who had sent an innocent child's head rolling across the negotiating table? The thoughts gnawed at Jeremy. He looked across the tactical displays, seeing the icons of human and Nausicaan ships wink out as they fell by the hundreds. The ruthless calculus of total war drove him to target the enemy's most vital worlds and infrastructure. Even as he wrestled with the morality of it all, he continued to plan strikes that would kill millions. There would be no surrender, no negotiated peace. Jeremy knew he was now locked into a war that could only end in the obliteration of the Nausicaans or the humans. Once the genie of ultimate vengeance had been unleashed, it would not stop until only one side remained. On Nausicaa Prime, Rigel whipped his people into a frenzy of fanatical resistance. Every Nausicaan knew the fate that awaited them if the humans triumphed, an existence of slavery and subjugation by a species they despised as weak and inferior. And so they fought with the desperate fury of a race that believed its only choices were victory or annihilation. And so the two sides continued their death grapple, filling the galaxy with the flames of war and the corpses of the fallen. Planets burned, suns dimmed, and space itself wept for the lives snuffed out. Jeremy held on to a fraying thread of hope that somehow, someway, humanity might still find its way through to a victory that didn't damn its soul in the process. But as the bones piled higher and the worlds burned, that hope dwindled. He had a feeling this war would haunt whatever was left of humanity long after the last shot was fired, if there was anything left at all by the end. The war stretched into its second year. Jeremy Reyes sat in the dimly lit war room, studying holographic displays of the latest battle reports. Red icons representing destroyed human ships and colonies blinked across the galactic map. An equally alarming number of blue Nausicaan targets had also winked out of existence. Jeremy rubbed his tired eyes. We can't keep this up. We need to end this decisively before both our civilizations are reduced to ashes. Admiral Chen nodded grimly. Agreed. But how? We're at a stalemate. Jeremy's fingers flew across the hollow interface, pulling up a classified intelligence report. This may be our answer. Our deep cover operatives have located a secret Nausicaan weapons facility. They're developing some kind of planet killer. Gasps echoed through the war room. Jeremy continued, If they complete this weapon, it's game over for Earth. We have to take it out, no matter the consequences. He outlined his audacious plan to personally lead a strike team in a covert assault on the facility. The other commanders voiced their objections. It's a suicide mission, Reyes. The facility will be heavily guarded. You'll never make it inside. Jeremy hit his fist on the table. Then what's your brilliant alternative? Wait for the Nausicaans to obliterate us. I'm going with or without your approval. After hours of heated debate, Earth's leaders reluctantly greenlit the operation. Jeremy assembled an elite squad of Earth's most lethal soldiers. As they prepped their gear, he addressed the team. I won't lie to you. Our odds of survival are slim, but the fate of our entire species rests on this mission. We cannot fail. Their stealth dropship pierced the atmosphere of the Nausicaan world under cover of darkness. As they neared the landing zone, proximity alarms blared. We've been spotted, the pilot shouted. Brace for impact! Plasma bolts rocked the ship as it crash-landed in a forested area. Jeremy kicked open the hatch. Move out! Head for the mountain base! His team sprinted through the underbrush as Nausicaan search parties converged. Alien war cries echoed through the night. Jeremy's squad responded with bursts of gunfire, cutting down the first wave of attackers. They fought their way to the entrance of the underground complex, leaving a trail of Nausicaan corpses in their wake. Jeremy planted shaped charges on the blast doors. Fire in the hole! The explosion ripped open the entrance. Jeremy's team stormed inside, engaging in brutal close-quarters combat with the facility's defenders. They battled room by room, planting demolition charges at key structural points. As Jeremy set the final charge, a massive figure blocked his path. Rigel sneered, brandishing a crackling energy blade. I've been waiting for you, human. Your skull will adorn my trophy wall. Jeremy drew his combat knife. I'm sending you straight to hell, you murdering bastard. They clashed in a vicious duel, blade against blade. Jeremy felt ribs crack as Rigel slammed him into a wall. He retaliated with a flurry of slashes, drawing alien blood. Rigel's energy blade sliced across Jeremy's chest, searing flesh. Jeremy howled in pain but pressed his attack. He feinted low, then drove his knife up under Rigel's chin. The Nausicaan's eyes went wide as the blade pierced his brainstem. Jeremy shoved the twitching body aside and staggered to the exit. Charges are set! Everyone out now! His surviving teammates sprinted for the escape tunnel as the facility began to shake. Explosions rippled through the complex. The mountain above started to collapse. They emerged into daylight just as the entire facility imploded. A massive sinkhole swallowed the mountain, burying the Nausicaan superweapon forever. As their extraction ship arrived, Jeremy surveyed the destruction. They'd struck a major blow, but at a terrible cost. How much more bloodshed lay ahead before this war finally ended? The dust settled on the ruins of the Nausicaan weapons facility. Jeremy and his surviving team stumbled onto the extraction ship, battered and bloodied but alive. As they lifted off, Jeremy slumped against the bulkhead, exhaustion washing over him. Back on Earth, the top brass hailed the mission as a turning point, but the celebrations were short-lived. Both sides poured everything they had into one last desperate push to break the stalemate. Jeremy found himself promoted to lead an elite strike force. Their mission: cripple the Nausicaan war machine by any means necessary. He handpicked the best of the best: demolitions experts, hackers, stealth specialists. They struck like ghosts in the night. On the Nausicaan industrial world of Kragthor, Jeremy's team infiltrated a massive shipyard. They planted charges on the structural supports and melted into the shadows. As they sped away in their stealth shuttle, the entire complex collapsed in on itself. On Zevin Prime, they uploaded a virus into the central computer network. Factory production lines ground to a halt. Power grids failed. The planet descended into chaos. Hit after hit, they hammered the Nausicaan infrastructure. But the aliens fought back with equal ferocity. Whole platoons of human troops were wiped out in brutal ambushes. Colonies fell to orbital bombardment. Jeremy pushed his team to the brink, allowing no respite between missions. He drove himself even harder, barely sleeping or eating. The faces of the dead haunted his dreams. Then came the pivotal mission. Intel revealed a Nausicaan mega shipyard churning out a vast armada. If those ships deployed, Earth would fall. Jeremy knew they had to take it out, despite the toll. They slipped past the outer defenses under cover of a sensor-scrambling device, but as they neared the main facility, alarms blared. They'd been detected. "Split up," Jeremy barked. "Plant your charges and rendezvous at the extraction point." Plasma bolts sizzled past as they scattered. Jeremy dove behind a stack of crates, returning fire. He counted 7 heavily armored Nausicaans bearing down on him. But something was off about them. They moved too fast, shrugging off direct hits. As one charged straight through a steel barricade, Jeremy's blood ran cold. These weren't ordinary troops. A booming voice cut through the din of battle. "Face me, human filth!" Jeremy's eyes widened as he saw the towering figure emerge. It was Rigel, but changed. Cybernetic implants bulged from his flesh. His eyes glowed an unnatural red. "How?" Jeremy whispered. Rigel's augmented voice carried across the hangar. "Did you think you could kill me so easily? I am beyond death now, and I will crush you and your pathetic species." Jeremy's mind raced. He was outmatched in every way, but he'd come too far to fail now. He triggered his comms. "All units fall back to the reactor core. Bring everything you've got." Jeremy sprinted through twisting corridors, Rigel's thunderous footsteps close behind. He skidded into the cavernous reactor chamber. His team was waiting, explosives primed. Rigel burst in, flanked by his cyborg warriors. "Nowhere left to run, vermin." "Who's running?" Jeremy snarled. He clicked the detonator. The chamber erupted in fire and shrapnel. The reactor containment failed, unleashing a hellstorm of plasma and radiation. Jeremy and his team dove for the emergency access shaft. As they clawed their way to the surface, the entire facility began to implode. From their evacuation shuttle, they watched a massive sinkhole swallow the shipyard. At its center, a pillar of radioactive fire reached to the stars, Rigel's funeral pyre. Jeremy allowed himself a grim smile. The tide had turned. Now it was time to end this war once and for all. He turned to his battered team. "We're taking the fight to their homeworld. Who's with me?" Their answering roar drowned out the engines as they rocketed into orbit, ready to join the fleet for humanity's final push. Their answering roar echoed through the ship as Jeremy's team rocketed into orbit. They rendezvoused with the massive human invasion fleet assembled above the Nausicaan homeworld. Thousands of warships filled space, weapons primed, and invasion forces ready. Jeremy stood on the bridge of the flagship, surveying the alien planet below. Its harsh volcanic surface glowed with rivers of molten rock. He keyed the comms. "All units, commence Operation Downfall." Space rippled as wormhole gateways tore open. Human troop transports poured through by the thousands. Jeremy watched grimly as the first waves of dropships plunged into the atmosphere, trailing fire. On the ground, human soldiers spilled from their landers into hell. Scorching winds lashed their armored forms. The earth trembled beneath their boots. In the distance, Nausicaan fortresses loomed. Plasma bolts shrieked overhead as fanatical Nausicaan defenders opened fire. Human troops dove for cover behind rock formations. "Push forward," a sergeant bellowed. "For Earth!" The humans surged ahead, returning fire. Bodies fell on both sides as the two forces clashed. Jeremy's voice crackled over the comms. "All units, hold position. Tactical nukes incoming." Brilliant flashes lit the sky. Mushroom clouds bloomed over Nausicaan strongholds. The alien fortifications cracked and crumbled under the onslaught. Jeremy watched the destruction from orbit, his face impassive. He remembered the child's severed head, stealing his dedication. "Ground forces, advance through the gaps. Take those cities." Human infantry poured into the irradiated ruins. They found dazed Nausicaan survivors stumbling through the rubble. Some surrendered. Others fought to the death. A soldier's voice came over the comms. "Sir, we're encountering heavy resistance in Sector 7. They've dug in deep." "Understood. Deploying flame units." Jets of liquid fire swept through Nausicaan tunnels and bunkers. Alien screams filled the air as Jeremy's forces gouged out footholds in the burning wreckage of cities. For days, the brutal urban combat raged. Human troops struggled to root out Nausicaan fighters hidden in the ruins. Snipers and booby traps took a heavy toll. Then reports came in of a new Nausicaan offensive. Jeremy scanned the tactical feeds with growing alarm. A massive armored spearhead was cutting through human lines, threatening to split the invasion force. At its head was a familiar figure. Cybernetic enhancements glinted on scarred Nausicaan flesh. "Rigel," Jeremy snarled. All units converge on Sector 9. We end this now. He boarded a command shuttle and plunged into the maelstrom below. Tanks dueled across blasted wastelands as Jeremy raced to join the fight. The two armies collided in an apocalyptic frenzy of fire and shrapnel. Jeremy's shuttle touched down amid the chaos. He leapt out, plasma rifle in hand, and charged into battle. "Push them back!" he roared, rallying nearby troops. For hours, the titanic armored engagement raged. Jeremy fought his way through waves of Nausicaan war machines. His rifle ran dry. He snatched up a fallen soldier's weapon and pressed on. At last, he spotted Rigel, standing atop a hulking tank. Their eyes locked across the battlefield. Jeremy keyed his command codes and called down the fury of the orbital fleet. Searing lances of energy stabbed from the sky, vaporizing Nausicaan armor. As Rigel's forces crumbled, Jeremy led the final push on the capital. They fought street by street, building by building. At last, they breached the royal palace. Inside, Jeremy found the Nausicaan ruler cowering on his throne. He strode forward, still gripping his rifle. "Sign it," Jeremy growled, shoving a datapad at the alien. "Unconditional surrender. Now." With trembling hands, the Nausicaan pressed his seal to the document. Jeremy snatched it back and transmitted the ceasefire order. After 3 years of horror, the guns fell silent at last. He walked to a window and looked out over the ruined city. Smoke rose from countless fires. The stench of death hung in the air. But it was over. The child was avenged. Jeremy stood at the window of his quarters, staring at the stars. The child was avenged, but at what cost? Billions dead. Worlds scorched to ash. He closed his eyes, but the images refused to fade. Cheers erupted as he stepped onto the stage. "The hero of Earth!" the announcer bellowed. Jeremy forced a smile, waving to the crowd. Their adulation felt hollow. That night, he bolted upright in bed, drenched in sweat. In his dreams, he saw cities burning, Nausicaan civilians fleeing from nuclear fire, the faces of his fallen comrades, accusing eyes boring into him. He visited Rigel in the prison ship. The Nausicaan cybernetic implants glinted in the harsh light. "Come to gloat, human," Rigel sneered. Jeremy said nothing. "You're no better than us," Rigel continued. "Look at what you did to my people. Billions dead. You're a butcher just like me." Jeremy's fists clenched. He wanted to argue, to justify his actions, but the words died in his throat. He left without a word, Rigel's laughter echoing in his ears. The next morning, Jeremy booked passage on a cargo hauler bound for the Outer Rim. He left no note, no explanation. He couldn't bear to face the accolades anymore. For months, he drifted from world to world. Work when he needed credits. Drink when the memories became too much. But the guilt followed him like a shadow. On a desolate moon, he stumbled upon a hidden valley. Strange, crystalline structures rose from the mist. Robed figures moved silently among them. An alien emerged from the fog. Its form was fluid, shimmering with an inner light. It spoke directly into Jeremy's mind. "Your spirit cries out in pain, human. We can help you find peace." Jeremy hesitated, then nodded. What did he have to lose? The trials began. Physical challenges pushed his body to its limits. Mental exercises forced him to confront his darkest memories. He relived the war in vivid detail, the deaths he'd caused, the destruction he'd wrought, but this time he couldn't look away. "Accept what you have done," the alien monks urged. "Only then can you move beyond it." Slowly, painfully, Jeremy faced his guilt. He accepted the weight of his actions, and in that acceptance, he found a measure of peace. A year passed. Jeremy emerged from his final trial, his body lean and hard, his mind clear. He was not absolved, but he was no longer consumed by self-loathing. He stood at the monastery's gates, gazing at the stars once more. It was time to return home, to face whatever judgment awaited him there. "Thank you," he said to the alien monk beside him. The being's form rippled. "Your journey is not over, Jeremy Reyes. It has only begun." Jeremy nodded, shouldered his pack, and set off toward the spaceport. Whatever came next, he would face it with clear eyes and an open heart. Jeremy's shuttle touched down on Earth's primary spaceport. As the airlock hissed open, he braced himself for the reception that awaited him. A sea of faces greeted him, some beaming with adoration, others twisted in disgust. "Murderer!" a voice cried out. A rotten fruit splattered against the hull inches from Jeremy's head. Security forces pushed back the crowd as Jeremy made his way to the waiting transport. He kept his eyes forward, refusing to acknowledge the conflicting chorus of cheers and jeers. Days later, Jeremy stood before the United Earth Council. The chamber buzzed with tension as he took his place at the podium. "Mr. Reyes," the lead counselor began, "you stand before us to give a full accounting of your actions during the Nausicaan War. Proceed." Jeremy cleared his throat. "On the third day of the Nausicaan homeworld invasion, I authorized a tactical nuclear strike on the city of Koros Prime." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Jeremy continued, his voice steady but hollow. "The strike eliminated Nausicaan anti-air defenses, allowing our dropships to land. Civilian casualties were extensive." For hours, Jeremy recounted incident after incident. The time he ordered supply lines cut to a Nausicaan prison camp, condemning thousands to slow starvation. The chemical weapons deployed to flush out underground bunkers. On the final day, Jeremy described his confrontation with Rigel at the royal palace. "We cornered the remaining Nausicaan leaders. I offered them surrender. They refused." Jeremy's voice wavered slightly. "I gave the order to execute them all." Outside the council chambers, riots erupted. Footage showed protesters clashing with police on a dozen worlds. "War criminal!" they chanted, burning Jeremy in effigy. Others rallied in his defense. "He saved humanity," they insisted. Through it all, Jeremy maintained his composure. His face betrayed no emotion as the council deliberated his fate. In the end, they punted the decision to a public referendum. For agonizing weeks, humanity argued and debated. The final tally came down to mere percentage points. Jeremy stood alone in his quarters as the results were announced. He'd been spared prosecution, but only barely. The weight of his actions pressed down on him, suffocating. That night, he penned his resignation from military service. Without fanfare, he boarded a shuttle bound for Luna. As Earth receded behind him, Jeremy gazed out at the stars. He wondered if humanity would learn from this horror, or if they were doomed to repeat it. On a prison transport bound for deep space, Rigel seethed in his cell. His cybernetic eye glowed with malevolent purpose as he addressed his fellow captives. "They think this is over," he growled. "But our children will return, and humanity will pay for every drop of Nausicaan blood spilled." The other prisoners murmured in agreement. As the ship vanished into the void, the seeds of future conflict were already taking root. Jeremy Reyes stood at the window of his lunar habitat, gazing at the stark gray landscape. 5 years had passed since he'd left Earth behind. His days blurred together in a haze of meditation and solitude. The comm unit chimed. Jeremy ignored it, as he had countless times before. But this time, the chiming continued insistently. With a sigh, he crossed the sparse room and activated the screen. A grim-faced military officer appeared. "Mr. Reyes, I apologize for the intrusion. We have an urgent situation." Jeremy's stomach clenched. He listened in growing horror as the officer detailed Rigel's escape and subsequent atrocities. The Nausicaaan's face filled the screen, cybernetic eye glowing as he executed another hostage. "We're powerless to stop him," the officer concluded. "You're our only hope." Jeremy's hands shook as he terminated the call. He paced the small habitat, mind racing. The guilt he'd worked so hard to bury came flooding back. Days passed in agonized indecision. Jeremy barely ate or slept. Reports of Rigel's attacks grew worse. Entire colonies wiped out. The United Earth Council decapitated. Then came Rigel's message. Jeremy watched, transfixed, as his old enemy spoke. "Greetings, Butcher," Rigel sneered. "How does it feel knowing your people will suffer as mine did? I won't stop until humanity is erased from existence. Unless Rigel's eye gleamed. Surrender yourself, Jeremy Reyes. Your public torture and execution might satiate our thirst for vengeance. Otherwise, the slaughter continues. The message ended. Jeremy sank to his knees, overwhelmed. He thought of the billions who would die if he refused. But could he sacrifice himself to the monster he'd created? A knock at the door startled him from his reverie. Jeremy opened it to find a haggard Earth official. "Mr. Reyes," the man said, "I know we have no right to ask this of you, but you're the only one who can stop Rigel. Will you help us one last time?" Jeremy stared past him at the airlock, picturing the shuttle that would take him back to Earth. Back to war. Back to the horrors he'd tried so hard to forget. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and made his choice. "I'll do it," Jeremy said softly. "Whatever it takes to end this. For good." The official sagged with relief. "Thank you. We have a ship waiting. If you'll come with me." Jeremy nodded. He grabbed a small bag, taking one last look at the Spartan room that had been his refuge. Then he stepped through the airlock, leaving his exile behind. As the shuttle lifted off, carrying him towards an uncertain fate, Jeremy steeled himself for the battles to come. He would face Rigel again, and this time, only one of them would walk away. The shuttle touched down on Earth with a jarring thud. Jeremy stepped out, his legs unsteady after years of lunar gravity. He squinted in the harsh sunlight, taking in the bustling military base around him. A gruff voice called out, "Reyes, over here!" Jeremy turned to see Colonel Harding striding towards him, flanked by a group of hard-eyed soldiers. The colonel's weathered face was grim as he extended a hand. "Welcome back to the fight, son. Wish it was under better circumstances." Jeremy nodded, his throat dry. "Fill me in." As they walked, Harding rattled off the grim statistics of Rigel's terror campaign. Colonies razed, millions dead, Earth's defenses in tatters. Jeremy's chest tightened with each new horror. They entered a fortified bunker, descending into the cool darkness. Banks of monitors flickered with tactical data and surveillance feeds. A diverse group of operatives huddled around a holographic display. Harding gestured to the assembled team. "Your new squad, the best we've got left." Jeremy studied their faces. A gaunt hacker with cybernetic implants, a burly demolitions expert missing an eye, a lithe sniper with a network of scars across her face. All bore the haunted look of veterans who'd seen too much. "All right, people, listen up," Jeremy said, his voice stronger than he felt. "You know the stakes. Rigel has to be stopped, whatever it takes." He strode to a nearby console, fingers flying over the keys. Years of studying Nausicaan tactics flooded back. "Their encryption's good, but I know how they think. Give me an hour." The team watched in silence as Jeremy worked, only the click of keys and hum of machinery breaking the tense quiet. Finally, a string of alien symbols flashed across the screen. "Got it," Jeremy breathed. "Rigel's holed up on an asteroid, XJ-147, and he's got some kind of experimental tech, a wormhole generator." The hacker whistled. That had let him pop up anywhere in human space. Jeremy nodded grimly. "Exactly. We hit hard, we hit fast. Prep for zero-G combat." Hours later, their stealth ship drifted towards the craggy asteroid. Jeremy's hands clenched as he stared at the pockmarked surface. Somewhere in that lifeless rock, his nemesis waited. A muffled thump signaled their magnetic grapples latching on. Jeremy checked his suit's seals one last time. "Remember," he said over the comm, "we're not here for glory. We're here to end this. For good." The airlock hissed open. Jeremy pushed off, floating into the inky void. His team followed, their shadows stark against the stars. They breached the asteroid's outer defenses with brutal efficiency. Jeremy's tactical genius and the team's ruthless skill proved a lethal combination. Nausicaan bodies floated in their wake as they fought deeper into the base. Alarms blared. Jeremy's HUD lit up with enemy signatures converging on their position. "We're blown," he snarled. "Push for the core." The corridor ahead erupted in plasma fire. Jeremy dove for cover behind a jutting crystal formation. His team returned fire, their weapons' muzzle flashes strobing in the dim light. Rigel's activating the generator, the hacker shouted. We're out of time. Jeremy gritted his teeth. Covering fire, I'm going in! He launched himself down the corridor, twisting to avoid sizzling bolts of energy. His mag boots clanged as he landed at the massive doors to the generator chamber. With a hiss of hydraulics, the doors slid open. Jeremy stepped inside, plasma rifle raised. There, bathed in the swirling energies of the wormhole generator, stood Rigel. The Nautican's cybernetic eye glowed with hate as he turned to face his old enemy. Welcome, Butcher, Rigel sneered. I've been waiting for you. Jeremy's finger tightened on the trigger. It ends here, Rigel, one way or another. The air crackled with ozone as the two adversaries faced off, the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. The acrid stench of ozone and charred flesh filled Jeremy's nostrils as he stood over Rigel's smoking corpse. The Nautican's cybernetic eye flickered and died, its malevolent glow extinguished forever. Jeremy's plasma rifle clattered to the ground as he slumped against the wall, exhaustion overwhelming him. It's over, he rasped into his comms. Rigel's dead. The generator's destroyed. Cheers erupted over the channel. Jeremy closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment of relief. He'd done it. He'd saved humanity once again. But fate wasn't finished with Jeremy Reyes. Days later, as he sat in a sterile debriefing room, an intelligence officer slid a data pad across the table. You need to see this, she said, her voice tight. Jeremy's eyes widened as he scrolled through the files. Encrypted messages, covert money transfers, surveillance footage. His mind reeled as the horrific truth came into focus. No, he whispered, it can't be. But the evidence was irrefutable. Members of his own team, soldiers he'd fought beside, bled with, had been working with Rigel all along. They'd fed the Nautican information, sabotaged key operations, all while pretending to be loyal comrades. Jeremy's fists clenched as fury coursed through him. He stormed out of the room, ignoring the shouts behind him. He had to confront them, had to know why. He found them in the officer's mess, the cybernetic hacker, the one-eyed demolitions expert, the scarred sniper. Their faces paled as Jeremy burst in, murder in his eyes. Why? He snarled, upending a table. How could you betray everything we fought for? The hacker sneered. You don't get it, do you? The Nausicaans were never the real enemy. It was always about power, about reshaping the galaxy in humanity's image. We gave Rigel what he needed, the sniper added, to push humanity to the brink, to make them strong enough to rule the stars. Jeremy's blood ran cold as the final piece clicked into place. The child, he said, the one whose death started it all. It was you, wasn't it? The demolitions expert's remaining eye glinted. A necessary sacrifice, the spark that lit the fire of human dominance. With a roar of rage, Jeremy launched himself at his former teammates. They scattered, reaching for weapons. The mess hall erupted into chaos as other soldiers dove for cover. Jeremy fought with the fury of a man betrayed, his fists and feet finding their marks with brutal precision. But he was outnumbered, outgunned. A plasma bolt seared his shoulder. A knife slashed his thigh. Gritting his teeth against the pain, Jeremy retreated, leading his pursuers through the winding corridors of the base. He needed to even the odds, needed a final confrontation on his terms. The chase led them to a waiting shuttle. Jeremy vaulted inside, slamming the emergency launch controls. His traitorous team clambered aboard, just as the engines roared to life. Where are you taking us? The hacker demanded as the shuttle rocketed into orbit. Jeremy's eyes were cold. To face justice. The shuttle streaked across the system, eventually touching down on a desolate moon. The shattered remnants of a human colony stretched to the horizon, a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered dreams. This is what your necessary sacrifice wrought, Jeremy spat as they disembarked. This is the price of your ambition. The traitors spread out, weapons drawn. Jeremy stood alone, unarmed, in the center of the ruined colony. You want to reshape the galaxy? He called out. You'll have to go through me first. What followed was a brutal dance of death. Jeremy's years of combat experience served him well as he ducked, weaved, and struck. He used the terrain to his advantage, drawing his opponents into kill zones and ambushes. One by one, they fell. The hacker, his implants shorting out as Jeremy crushed his skull against a fallen beam. The demolitions expert, impaled on a jagged piece of rebar. The sniper, her neck snapped in a savage grapple. As the last body hit the ground, Jeremy stood panting in the silence. Blood, some his, some theirs, dripped from his battered form. He surveyed the carnage, his face a mask of grim satisfaction. But as the adrenaline faded, the weight of what he'd learned crashed down upon him. The senseless slaughter, the lies, the betrayal. It was too much to bear. Jeremy staggered to the edge of the ruined colony, gazing out at the star field beyond. Worlds burned because of the machinations of a few power-hungry extremists. How many more horrors lurked in the shadows of human ambition? He couldn't go back, couldn't face a humanity that might very well tear itself apart if they learned the truth. With heavy steps, Jeremy made his way back to the shuttle. As he punched in coordinates for the depths of uncharted space, Jeremy knew his war was just the beginning. He would carry these terrible secrets with him, a silent guardian against the darkness that lurked in the hearts of both alien and human. The shuttle's engines flared to life, carrying Jeremy Reyes into the unknown. Behind him, the galaxy settled into an uneasy quiet. But in the vast emptiness of space, new conflicts smoldered, waiting for their chance to ignite.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.